they get burnt out and they go, what the hell am I doing? Why is surely there's a better way? And of course, there is a better way, which is finding your wise adult.
Louise, thank you so much for joining me on the Mindful podcast once again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me back. I'm thrilled to be back chatting with you.
Me too. We're looking at struggling with relationships today. Are you a bit of a masochist in the fact that you invite people's messy, complicated baggage, relationship stuff on yourself, and through your wisely attached program, you try to unpick everything? It's like trying to untangle all the cables from behind the television. Why do you do this to yourself?
Well, that's an interesting spin. Let me catch the thread.
Yeah, I got to
Um,
handle my own relationships, never mind everybody else's.
I think, look, I have, since I was little, actually, I've always been fascinated with people, just with people.
Mm,
Why do people do the things that they do? But I think as I trained and as I grew myself professionally and personally through the last couple of decades, what I started to see was that everything plays out in the context of a relationship somehow, in some
mm,
way, whether it's from your earliest years, in your teenage years, whether it's school, whether it's your parents, whether it's peers, and into adulthood, right into the career ladder and everyone you're surrounded by there, and then your adult relationships there. Everything is in the context of a relationship. Either
mm.
what you got too much of, or what you didn't get at all, the absence of. And I guess I spent many years as well working just in the field of mental health and seeing people present with certain issues, like whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever label got put onto it. And over time, I began to see actually that is a manifestation of something earlier on that happened, something that led you to see or believe something about yourself or about the world. And
Mm.
that led to adaptations that we call anxiety or depression, ways of coping. And so the long answer to your question is, why am I so fascinated by relationships? Why do I invite it in? Is because actually I think it is the root of most things. 9 times out of 10, relationships are the root of what we are experiencing now in our lives.
What are the primary relationships that people are suffering with, are finding challenges with, that are coming to you?
I get people across the entire range of relationships. I get people who are married in relationship, who have lost themselves in relationship, whether they're married or not. People who are struggling to be in relationship, to find a relationship. People who are struggling with their children, with whether it's estranged relationships, or people who are struggling with relationships in work, in the work environment as well. And ranging in age from 30 right up to 60. So, and everyone, all genders. So it's not, this is the thing, right? There's no niche market for relationships. They
Mm.
affect everybody and they either support everybody or the source of pulling the rug out from underneath people. So that's what I love about it. It's extremely varied.
Are the symptoms of someone dealing with a s- challenging relationship the same? Do they present to you with the same kind of issues, whether they're estranged from a kid or fighting with their mother-in-law?
It, at a first blush, if you're to look at something briefly, things look similar, right? Oh, you're
Mm,
having a fight with such and such. Oh, that relationship has broken down. Or, oh, you're struggling to use your voice in relationship, right? So there's very categorical things you can point at
mm.
eas easily. But when you dig down, there's so much complexity because we're much more inclined to look at, well, that person did this, and this is why I feel like that. And this is why I do the things that I do. Whereas actually, if you start to strip back the layers, it's, well, what led you into that kind of a relationship in the first place? What kind of needs were you trying to get met in that relationship? Or what kind of skills did you learn early on to stay connected to somebody else that are playing out now in your adult relationship? So, for example, did you learn early on to sacrifice your needs because that's what kept other people close to you? Because you're not a burden, right? You've got no
Mm.
need. You're quiet, you shrink. So you don't risk saying or using your voice about what needs you have because that could send the person away because perhaps that is what happened once upon a time. Maybe you learned when you were little that having needs was an absolute burden and it led to conflict and it led to you being pushed away or out of the unit in some shape or
Mm.
form, even
Do
verbally.
eldest children deal with a bit of that in terms of having to just sort of get on with things? You know, there's a bit more weight on their shoulders sometimes. Am I barking up the wrong tree there?
No, but um, I it's not a given, but
Mm,
in the context of being an eldest child, if there are other children that came after you as the eldest child, yes, you will be taking on more responsibility because there are little ones behind you. There's less attention that's given to you because the little ones came behind you, but you're also engaged with a parent who's a parent for the first time. And with
mm.
that comes anxiety, and with that comes fear, and with that comes perhaps overreactions at times that the other ones that are coming behind you don't necessarily get. So you're at the coal face of this person becoming a parent for the first time. That's your parent. But you're also trying to pave your way and your individuality into the world. So yeah, there are different, you're faced with different challenges as an eldest child. There are different challenges across the board, no matter your place in the family, actually. It depends on how it plays out. But again, there are so many factors, so many
Mm.
variables that could be weighed in different ways that impact how that person actually presents.
That's what I'm fascinated about, how you apply your roadmap to all these different kinds of relationships. Um, so take us through maybe a couple of the steps that you use to, I guess, to help people.
Yeah. So I create, and again, this was after 16 years working on mental health, and more specifically about 8 years working with relationships and focus on relationships. And I got to the point really the start of last year where I thought there's something that can be done differently here.
Mm,
There's something that can be done more, I would say, deliberately, let's say. So rather than the therapeutic one-on-one sort of let's see what manifests and we can guide and advise and support and kind of pull the thread, I felt like there was something that could be done more directly. And so I created the program that's called Wisely Attached. It's 12 weeks and it's a roadmap. And it's a roadmap that takes you into your psyche, into understanding yourself in a way that you never have before. And it's challenging. It takes you right into what I call your relational DNA. So we all have a relational
mm.
DNA. And it's a
Scary,
blueprint.
a scary place. It's
It
like
is.
the
It,
dark woods at night.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes there's bats there and sometimes there's owls, and we don't know what sounds we're going to hear. We don't know what we're
Yeah.
going to see when we go in there. And, I prepare everybody who's doing this program about that. And that's week 2. So it's a baptism of fire. You're dropped
Mm.
right in to looking at ghosts, to looking at the past, with the view to really understanding why we see the world the way we do, why we see ourselves the way we do, and why we see other people the way we do.
Isn't
And
that a dangerous place, or a tricky place? Because a lot of people may be okay with going back there and going, oh, this person treated me like this and that was terrible, and I experienced this trauma, and this happened to me and that framed me. Uh, but at that point, if somebody, you can get stuck there sometimes and go, well, that just gives me permission to act this way for the rest of my life. I guess your clients have to be willing to look at this stuff, go, all right, this a lot of this possibly was unfair, but how am I going to move on from that? And not
yeah,
everybody can move on from that.
yes. And I think this is one of the problems.
Mm,
So I designed it such that you're compelled to move past it. And you're compelled to move past it because first and foremost, you understand that what you experienced wasn't necessarily deliberate or intentional. We are a
mm,
product of our own parents' upbringing. This is never about blame and it's never couched in blame. I have parents coming to me looking at their own childhood, feeling and only focused on their own kids now as a result of doing this. And so we have to pull it back and go, this is none of it is about blaming or wagging the finger at someone. It's
mm.
simply about being curious and
And what do you
understand.
mean parents are coming to you only focused on their own kids? What do you mean by that?
So parents come to
Mm,
investigate their own relational style. But when they go into relational DNA, they start to think about how they are impacting their own children. Do you understand?
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
their focus shifts and they start to become much more self-aware in terms of their behaviors and the impact of their kids based on what they experienced with their own parents. So there's a generational effect at looking at this, but it means that you start to take accountability. It's not about wallowing around in what you discover. Yes, there's some grief often in what you discover. So if you're ex incredibly perfectionistic, for example, right?
Hmm.
It means that when you go all in and things are, shiny and polished and beautiful. But it also might mean 90% of the time you don't start it, you don't finish it because it's never good enough. It's never good enough. And that perfectionistic streak stops you from actually doing the things that matter to you in your life. And
Yeah.
it
I
often
was listening to a podcast, Mark Megan's podcast recently, and there was someone was talking about their mother who used to wipe the dog's paws when he came in from the garden, but then also wipe the dog's bum after after he'd done his business in the garden because she was such a perfectionist that her house had to be perfectly clean, even the dog's butt. Yeah, I think that's perfectionism on a whole new level. You may not have dealt with that kind of thing yet.
it's a new one, but I mean,
Yeah. Sorry
also
for lowering the tone.
no, but all of these things, we all have these unique little behaviors that are not a problem in and of themselves until they become a problem in our
Mm.
relationship. Nothing that we do is a problem until it is a problem in our relationship. And the thing about it is that when we are little, we are wired to survive. So there's lots of talk about attachment. It's become very popularized. And we think about attachment in terms of how we relate to other people. We think of it in terms of love. But actually, attachment is about survival. How did we learn to survive as kids, as little toddlers? Well, we learned to adapt because the most paramount thing that we had to chase was connection, because connection allowed us to survive and it gave us protection. And so
Yeah.
we adapt.
It is powerful, as you say. I'm thinking of Katrina O'Sullivan's book Poor, which is amazing. And she talks about growing up in the home of addicts. Both her parents were heroin addicts, and you go, why do young children stay so connected and attached to parents who are visibly doing damage? And it's because it's you. What choice do they have? It's that survival. We cling to people even if it's not a healthy relationship. If we need to survive, we'll do it.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
And we, as little kids, would much rather assume responsibility for what's happening. Because why? Because that allows us to feel like we have some control.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's protecting us, but actually it can be quite damaging because you're taking on essentially blame for something that may not be your fault.
Exactly that. And then that persists into adulthood.
Wow.
And
So
that
how would that manifest? How would you see that manifesting in, some of your clients' lives? What might that look like?
the savior complex is one of them. Because if you're a little and you actually play, you feel like, and maybe you actually do play a role, right, in mitigating uh, contentious circumstances in the household. Maybe you do become the people pleaser, right? That you're able to
Mm,
sort of bring down the tensions. You're able to appease the tyrant in the house, right? So, but you're also able to save the victim, which is the parent. And then you take that into adulthood and you continue to be the savior. So this
mm,
savior complex plays out in I will bend over backwards to fix you. I will give you everything I have. I will sacrifice everything I have. I will subjugate all my needs to make sure you're okay. And again, this is adaptive when we're a kid. This makes sense when we're a kid.
mm.
And there can be things that are born out of the adaptations we have as kids that are actually really useful. They can be really quite interpersonally skillful as an adult. It can be skillful to be attuned to someone else and go, well, I know what you need actually, and I have a sense of what you need. And that's a beautiful thing. But then it takes a dark turn in adulthood. And it's what we see as mental health issues when somebody has a complete loss of identity because they have given all of themselves to other people and they
Mm.
define themselves through how someone else sees them. And that's what we see in the therapy room then when it takes a turn.
Yeah, interesting. And so, okay, so on the roadmap, we go back. we have a look at our own mental home movies and say, okay, maybe, I experienced that, so maybe that's pointing me in this direction. This explains some of my behavior, which I guess must be quite a revelation for a lot of people. And actually, I suspect quite reassuring to them that they're not just crazy or they're not just weird,
Yeah.
or self-destructive. There are reasons why those patterns began, and that must come as a form of relief to people, right?
Yes, it does actually. And it can go a couple of ways. If people
Mm,
reveal some things that they didn't really identify before, there can be a lot of grief there
mm.
to move through. But for some people, including people who have really difficult pasts, it is a complete enlightenment and relief. It's a
Yeah,
relief.
it's almost like a diagnosis, in
Yes.
a way that I speak to so
Without
many
alone.
adults with
Yeah,
ADHD diagnosis, and they go, "My God, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me because it just explains why I am the way I am." And I think that just we're almost lifting off some of that responsibility we were talking about that we took on, and you can put it down on the table and go, "That's not actually mine," and it makes sense to me now.
that's right. But here's the key
Yeah.
bit.
Mm.
We can lift off the responsibility and say, oh my God, I see why that was coded into me. I see why I do these things.
Yeah.
But now I have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah. What am I going
Now
to do
I
about
have
it?
to take accountability for that. Yeah. And
Interesting.
that,
Okay, so I guess that takes us to the next stage of the roadmap. How do you begin that process?
so the 12 weeks are based on the three parts of you. We all have three parts. Not one person is immune from having three parts. Okay. And I call those three parts the wounded, wild, and wise. So
Interesting.
the wounded part of us is the original kid. It's the original, the true self who was wounded through relationship. And those wounds don't have to be big and dark and deep. They can be little wounds. They can be being ignored a few times, right? Or chronically. Or
Mm.
it doesn't have to be a big, heinous act at all for us to develop adaptations. And this is why this is for everybody. It's not just for the big T trauma, it's for everyone because we've all been traumatized with a little t to some extent in childhood. That is the nature of being a human being. Nobody's perfect.
Mm.
And what matters is the message that we took from that and how did we bend ourselves in order to cope with it. So the original wound, then the wild self. So this is the part of us that shows up in relationship and kicks off and catastrophizes, right? Or withdraws or has this unbridled self-expression. No, you listen to me now, right? Or this kind of sort of temperament that you bring into relationship that's either walled up, right? Walled off. We're gone. Don't even talk to me. Don't bother. Or it's boundaryless, which is don't you go anywhere. You have to talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Completely boundaryless, right? So
Mm.
it's typically one or the other. If we have an insecure behavior, it's one or the other. We're either walled off or we're boundaryless. Also can be known as anxious attachment or avoidant attachment to some extent. So we then start to learn what our wild self is doing in relationships and why it no longer works.
And does
And
this apply to all relationships?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
really interesting. Yeah.
It it tends to come out much more in emotionally charged relationships.
Okay.
Hence, people come more often than not, people will come to therapy or seeking support in the context of a romantic relationship or a familial relationship.
Mm. Bit
Because
more pressure cooker there.
yes, there's more charge there. There's more
Yeah.
patience there. There's more sense of worth wrapped up in both of those things.
Mm. And would you see someone exercising those traits, that wild side, in their romantic relationship, but then applying the same actions and rules to a sibling relationship or a boss or
Mhm.
yeah, do you see the traits popping up everywhere?
Absolutely that. Yeah. So take
Yeah.
anxious attachment, for example, which can be quite boundaryless. Anxious attachment, if I was to sort of blunt the meaning of it, and there's no nuance in what I'm about to say, but if I'm to
Mm.
blunt the meaning of it, it's I don't trust my relationship with myself in order to feel safe. You need to think I'm good. You need to think I'm great. So my own sense of protection and safety comes from you. Okay, so that's anxious attachment. So that will play out in friendships. That'll play it in family and romantic relationships, and
And
it'll
what will
play it.
that look like? What kind of behavior is that?
So you often see memes like this, which is, are you mad at me? Is everything okay? Are we okay? You seem a bit off. Is there something wrong? Did I do something to upset you? Right? That kind of sort of anxious, beseeching. Tell
Okay.
me I'm okay. Tell me everything is okay. And in work, that might be overproducing. It might be over functioning. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you think I'm good because only you can make me feel better. Whoever the line of authority is in whatever situation.
Mm. So
That's
that
that's
could be
act-
somebody taking on too much work, putting their hand up for everything maybe in the office in order
yes,
to get that validation from a boss or whatever. And then
exactly.
they end up burnt out.
Yeah, and resentful. It can actually be
Mm.
partnered a lot with the feeling of being resentful because you're giving and giving and giving in the hope that you receive. And that makes it sound transactional, but it's coming from again, it's coming from the wounded
Mm.
place.
It
So
sounds
the
exhausting. It just
well,
sounds like you're in work going, like, God, nobody appreciates me and I'm working harder than everybody else. And then you go home and you go, is everything okay? Do you still love me? You're like, Jesus, that's so tiring.
but it is tiring. This is why
Yeah.
people hit the wall and they get burnt out and they go, what the hell am I doing? Why
Mm.
is this? Surely there's a better way. And of course there is a better way, which is finding your wise adult. So I work and train with Terry Real, and he came up with the concept of the wise adult. And the wise adult
Mm.
is not something that we automatically know how to be. We have to create it. But it relates back to who we originally were before the wild self adapted to keep us safe. So being a wise adult, inhabiting your wise adult, is understanding that actually you're safe now. You're safe inside of your own skin now. And what does that mean? That you don't have to do, that you don't have to continue to do. What does that mean? And look, it takes time because we're unwiring old stories. We're having to lift up, we're first having to identify the story that we tell ourselves, all these limiting beliefs that we have about who we are and what we need in order to feel worthy and accepted.
Mm.
And then we have to let that go and actually realize, well, that doesn't have to be the story. It can be something else. And if I was living inside of my wise adult, how am I going to behave differently? What will I be doing differently? How will I
Yeah.
behave in a fight with someone, for example? What will it look like if I'm inhabiting my wise adult?
Well, it's really moving from conscious behavior from unconscious, isn't it?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's hard because
Mhm.
anyone who's ever tried mindfulness knows it's really hard to be mindful all the time
Yeah.
because we're naturally slipping back into neurological grooves here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
So, what are the practices that you do to help people to stay more conscious in terms of their behavior and activate new software in their minds?
hmm So every week I talk to them about these concepts each week. So each of the 12 weeks has a different fundamental milestone on this
Hmm.
road. And so relational DNA is one, right? Stance is another, which is what's your stance in relationship? What way do you show up? And what way does someone else show up? And what's the dance that emerges from that? And how does that pattern keep going? And how are you playing a role that's keeping the wheels turning? So there's a huge amount of accountability in this.
Yeah.
There's,
Stance, stance, dance.
yeah,
I love that. And
it's also,
because I guess people would
yeah.
be quite familiar with that, I suspect, yeah, not only in romantic relationship, but maybe sibling relationships where every time we meet up, so and so kicks off, and then you jump in and you say all these horrible things, and it's just this cycle, and we're never meeting up again. And then until the next time, and it all kicks off again. Those kinds of patterns maybe would that be right?
Exactly. But remember, each person is playing a role.
Mm.
But it's easy for one person to go, oh my God, they're so annoying. They keep showing up with the same thing. They never learn, right? But we're sitting there participating in the whole thing, you know, because what it actually requires, and this is the toughest part, what it actually requires is leaving the ego at the door and actually going, okay, I'm not going to participate in this, or I'm going to do something different here, or I'm going to
Mm.
let this fly. I'm not going to combat it. If it's a relationship that's important to me, if it's in my family, and you always have that choice. Is this relationship important to me or is it not? And how do I act accordingly? if I wanted to keep this person in my life, then, and I want to change this dynamic, then I have to start by changing myself. And most people don't want to do that, right? Because it feels, well, they're the one that's doing it, right? They're the
Yeah,
one that,
they're the idiot.
yeah,
They should be doing this course.
they
Actually,
should do it. Yeah.
here's a question for you. What do you do if you've decided to go, you know what? I'm going to dig deep. I'm going to go into the woods. I'm going to make the changes. I'm going to be more conscious. And the other person in the relationship has no interest.
Mm,
They don't want to go anywhere. They don't want to do any of the work, as the American self-help books say.
mm,
You know, I get a lot of people coming to me saying, you know, how do I get my partner into this? They're so stressed and I'm on this big journey and they're not going anywhere. They're not
yeah.
just not willing to even open their mind. What do you do in that situation if one person is really willing to
Mm.
take on all the wonderful information you're giving them, but the other key people in this relationship are no interest?
We cannot control anyone else, no
Mm,
matter what the circumstance. And we can beg and plead, and it won't have any impact. So we have to take accountability for how we're showing up. And if we want to still keep that relationship, well, then we need to begin understanding things from their perspective. Often, when we get entrenched in that dynamic,
mm.
it becomes so much their fault. They won't do this and they won't participate and they won't change. And we get so ramped up and we tell our friends about it and they go, oh, isn't he terrible? Oh, isn't she awful? Oh my God. And she won't even go and get the help.
I'm
Right. And
seeing glasses of rosé in my mind. Two glasses of rosé. Now let me tell you what he did this week.
it can
I've left
also
the
work
books.
the other way.
Yeah,
The,
I've left the books
like,
by the bed. I've emailed the links to the podcasts. Won't even try them.
won't even touch it. Won't even touch
Yeah.
it. Why? Because when we start standing back and looking at the dynamic, nobody wants to be lectured. Nobody
Mm.
wants to be put in the lecture theatre with you on the podium telling them what to do. They're immediately going to withdraw. So one of the things that we look at again in the program is where are you on the relationship grid? Are you walled off, like this person who won't get any help and won't participate? And if you are walled off, why? There's probably a very good reason. And so the boundaryless partner who's coming in going, you need to do this work and you won't do it, and only I'm doing it, is only making this person more walled off. So if you can't get that person in to get support with you, well, then work on understanding how you are playing a role in the current dynamic. I'm sure you're beginning to see that a lot of this is putting the ego down. We have to put the ego down. The reason
Mm.
we put the ego down is so that we can actually change our own lives in the context of our relationship. You know, it is often that argument, well, why should I be the one? Well, why shouldn't you be the one? Right? Because it's affecting you. So you're taking accountability also for your own life, even if it's just you doing the work. And here's the thing. If you do the work, if you change your behavior, and this person still doesn't, and it's still not good enough, well, now it's time to look at the relationship and letting go, perhaps, of the relationship. Not everything is about relational repair. Sometimes it's understanding when to let go. It's both of those things. But
Mm.
often, I will say, when people change and become really aware of their role and change how they're behaving and how they relate to the other person, there often is a shift in the dynamic for the better.
So you explore the wounded, the wild, and then the wise, and more conscious decision making and self-awareness and all that good stuff. What
Yeah,
kind of feedback do you get at the end then of the course? You touched on some of it there. Maybe some of them go, do you know what? I can see now this relationship is going nowhere. I need to move on, or it's not worth saving. Or what kind of feedback do you get as they're like, oh my God, my marriage is transformed? What kind of stuff do you hear?
the, what I always say about this program is that this is about changing the relationship with yourself. First and foremost, by consequence, it changes the relationship with other people because it changes how you show up. Because and for the first time, and some of the testimonials will say, for the first time, if I'm to speak of it collectively, what they're saying is that for the first time, they stand on their own 2 feet. They feel safe inside of their own skin. They get to a place where they find agency and autonomy to use their voice. Often people are afraid to use their voice, or they might have an inner sense of what they want, but it doesn't get translated with when they speak. So the inner voice is beginning to match the outer voice. So they ask for what they want. They ask for what they need. You'd be so surprised at the amount of people who don't know how to ask for what they need and who feel vulnerable asking, that it puts them in a one down position. So people find themselves in the context of this. This program is intense. I won't beat around the bush about that. It's intense. You know, for the people who choose to get involved in it, I really prepare them for that. It's 12 weeks. You go all in. You go all
I'm imagining you in your drill sergeant uniform walking up and down the line. You better get ready. You better get ready to feel wounded. You better get ready to feel wild.
in. That's
Drop and give me
exactly
50 push-ups and burst into tears.
I tell you something, right? And this is moving away. I love therapy. It's incredible. It has a place. This is different, and it's different for a reason. And the way I say it is that I will compassionately confront you, but I will ferociously support you when I do that.
Love it.
And it changes people. And I was so enlivened. I ran the pilot last summer, and my God, I mean, it was emotional at the end. We were all of us were
Mm.
emotional. Because you go there together. You go into
Do
places
people meet in person or is it
all
online
online.
or
Yeah, it's
okay.
all online. Although the alumni, as I like to call them, are speaking about doing a meet up in person because
Ah,
you go through these, you really look at places that you haven't looked at before, and you have to
yeah.
in order to reveal to yourselves the way that you're keeping yourself stuck. There's
Mm.
one thing about taking accountability is that it frees you in your life. We're more inclined to feel, and maybe we have been victimized. It's not that we haven't. Maybe we actually have been victimized in our lifetime. But if we stay there, if we stay in victim consciousness, we will always remain stuck.
Mm.
So it's about acknowledging the grief that comes with having been victimized at a certain point in their lives or throughout our lives. And now what do we do next? How do we
Yeah.
take accountability for the life that we want to live next? And
There's
how
a
do we
phrase
stand?
that's
Mm.
come up throughout the podcast series, and it's discipline is freedom. And it's kind of echoed in what you're saying there, that you said this gives you it sets you free. Taking accountability
Oh
gives you
yeah.
that freedom, but it does require an element of discipline, that conscious awareness in our behavior and all that. So
Yeah.
by tapping into that, we free ourselves to make conscious choice in relationships and enjoy those relationships without second guessing ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
And when it's so powerful when you talk about the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. It can sound like a cliche, but I think it can, man, it can change everything. And I think back to myself, and I'm sure most people can think back to times in their life when they weren't too secure in themselves and weren't able to stand on their own 2 feet. And, I remember, if I was in a relationship, I wouldn't have brought anything up. I wouldn't have felt confident to challenge or speak for what I needed. I would probably use alcohol to let everything blurt out in one messy go, you know. Um, I remember even going in to sit with my bosses in work and try and have maybe a contract negotiation. I was in bits. I had no sense of self-confidence or self-worth, or I was not standing on my own 2 feet. Those situations were really difficult for me. And I guess over years of cultivating some self-awareness and looking at my own behaviors and things and just simply getting older as well. I think sometimes some of that wise version of ourselves can naturally grow too. But you know, it's so transformative for me. It's still stuff I still get stuff wrong. I still, you know, make a hames of some confrontations, but generally speaking, I feel like I can stand on my own 2 feet. And I would love 20 years ago me to get a glimpse of that and go, it's not always going to be this hard. You won't always be stuttering and nervous and sweating in difficult conversations with authority figures. You will be in a relationship where you can sit calmly and go, let's work this out. You won't need to reach for alcohol or other things to get things off your chest or to find your voice. I think that's, as you say, just so empowering for someone to feel, wow, I'm standing on my own 2 feet now.
I love what you just said. For many reasons, but also because I identify with it. That was me.
Mm,
I did this course because I needed that course in my 20s and 30s. I did
yeah.
exactly what I needed because it was like I was an X-ray walking around.
Yeah. That's
You
a
know,
lovely way of putting it. Yeah.
it wasn't a full self because I I only had worth if other people saw it in me. And if they didn't, I would collapse. It was that
Mm.
brittle, my sense of self. And because I derived it from supporting other people. I mean, hello, I became a psychologist. What you do it. Now I'm ensuring that you're dependent on me, right? Not dependent. You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
but I have a healthier relationship with that now. But it took a hell of a long time to realize I did not need the approval of anybody else. And because if for some reason we feel like we are dependent on approval from early on in any capacity, and by the way, it's not just parents, it can also be the schooling that we had, it can be the wider environment that we grew up in. Hell, it's
Mm.
culture and society as well to a certain extent. But if we are dependent on that, then we can spend our entire lives looking to be reparented by someone else who'll give us approval. And that will continuously keep us in a child one down position. Oh, you approve of me. Oh my God, finally, I feel redeemed. But we have to redeem ourselves. And actually, that process can feel, interestingly, a little bit disappointing. Right before it feels freeing. Then it feels freeing. But initially you realize, oh Jesus, no one's going to do it for me. I'm not going to be blessed with the intoxicating, approving, validating gaze of someone else. That's not going to be the thing that heals me. It's myself. But it's also has to be in the context of a relationship. This is the interesting part.
Mm.
And this is why sometimes I will talk about the wellness industry as leading people slightly astray overall, because we can't do all this by ourselves. We can do all this self-empowerment, personal development. I was weak, now I'm strong, to hell with everybody else. But actually, we are cutting off the life force. We're cutting off the thing that brings us the most feeling of satisfaction and contentment and peace. And that's the ability to be with another, not dependent on another, but to be with another with authentic, sincere, genuine intimacy and connection, because that is the most healing thing of it all. And we need to do that in the context of relationship.
And do you think people can't get that from books? They can't self-help their way out of it?
I think you can derive a hell of a lot from books, but we need
Mm.
to put it into practice. And this is the part where, people are like, well, I went to therapy for 10 years and I'm in the same place. And often I think, okay, well, one, it depends on the therapist, of course. It depends on what's happening. It depends on what you're bringing as a client into the room as well. It's balanced, but it also depends on what are you doing next? Because you can understand your relational DNA, you can understand everything that happened to you till the cows come home, right? And we can wrap the most beautiful and intricate words and tapestry around
Mm.
understanding what happened to us. But if we don't do something different, everything will stay the same. And
Yeah.
in order to do something different, we have to be courageous. Courage is one of the pillars of the whole program.
Mm.
Have to
I
take
would
it.
like to say that some books are different. I'm holding a copy of my own book, Busy and Wrecked. Sometimes a book offers all the answers.
You are so true. And that is a thick looking book, I must say.
Yeah, oh, big font. That's a secret. Big font. Uh, but you know what? I think we all know that person, and maybe some people listening are that person and are aware of it as well.
Yeah.
Where you may have a couple where one person is reading all the books and has downloaded every program and has done this, that, and the other, and they're given out about their partner who's not getting into any of the stuff. But actually, they're not putting any of the stuff they're reading into practice. They're just reading all the books and
Yes.
listening to all the podcasts.
Yes.
But, so I think we're all familiar with that. And I guess certainly I have fallen into that trap over the years. I think we all do.
Yeah, everyone getting the Stephen Bartlett links. Listen to this. You know, watch
Yeah.
this.
Oh my God, life
Yeah.
changing. You know, we watch
Yeah.
it flicking through it on our reels on Instagram. You're like, oh my God, that's it. I'm changing. Oh, another reel. Dogs doing something
Exactly.
funny.
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what you just said is so important because we listen to all these things, we go, "Oh my God, this is the answer." And then it sort of transmutes into a complaint, right? Rather than a, "Oh, okay, how do I do things differently? How do I use my voice to
Mm.
ask for what I need?"
Give us an
So
example of, oh my God, this is the answer, and that transmuting into a complaint.
So the
Oh,
complaint is, oh, I've just realized that you never do anything for me. I've just realized that you never take me on a date. I've just
thanks,
realized
Diary of a CEO, for making this so clear. You're an idiot.
you don't treat me well enough, I've just realized. Right? And so it transmutes into this complaint of the other person. This other person hasn't listened to Stephen Bartlett, right? He's gotten huge here. But and is going, what? What? So this is coming kind of out of the blue, maybe, and it's in the form of a complaint. And if something's in the form of complaint, the other person is not going to listen.
Yeah,
Not really. They might look like,
that's
but they're not.
that's so great. I just have that image of somebody sitting there surrounded by stacks of books, and finally finishing the last and latest Deepak Chopra book and putting it down and going, "Oh my God, that's it. You're an asshole." You know?
It's like
I finally, hallelujah.
I was,
No,
I was
this is where the work begins now.
I was working with a couple before, Dermot, and trying to get the guy to connect more with his feelings. So he was a sort of a performer, so
Mm,
very quite masked, and knew how to be in the world without revealing anything that was remotely vulnerable or real or true or intimate. And trying to get him to connect to the feeling of what it was like to be in this dynamic with this partner. And everything that you're saying is a thought or a perception about this woman.
mm.
You think that she's doing this. You are judging her for doing A, B, and C, for being dismissive, for being angry all the time. So say what you feel. What's the feeling behind it? And he'll go, he said, "Well, I feel like you're a bitch." Right? It's like, okay.
You're like, my
Okay.
work is done here.
Yeah. That's really back. Let's come back. So yeah, but I suppose this is why I'm saying that the roadmap is a roadmap, but it has to apply to you uniquely and individually. So for him, it was about how do you connect to the feeling of what happens? For someone
Mm,
else, how do you raise up out of the feeling because you're becoming consumed and you're drowning in the feeling of it. So how do you connect to the wise part, to the more practical part? So depending on where you're coming from, the roadmap applies to everybody, but you have to use it in a way that works for you.
incredible. I feel like you're a wonderful person and you're helping a lot of people. I love that story. His moment of quiet revelation.
Yeah, he's
Things that
thrilled.
I
Well,
could hear a lot of male listeners, going, yeah, I think I could relate to that. Finally, something I
I
can
should say
connect to.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Louise, thanks so much. Where can people find you and your amazing work?
Wiselyattached.com. And I'm just finishing one round actually of the program, and I'm opening applications this week actually for that one. If anyone is
Okay.
interested, they can apply through wiselyattached.com.
Fantastic. Louise Carroll, thanks so much for your expertise, time, and energy and kindness. Great to have you back on the pod.
Thank you, Dermot. Love chatting to you.